necessary components to that. Our planning process didn't really lay out very effectively the kinds of places that we ought to be housing things like stronger commercial and even light industrial development. This county has all kinds of lands, and we need to be real clear on what we want to do and where we want to do it. And the planning process is one vehicle through which that can be achieved. But I think we have problems greater than that. I already talked about gridlock. When we have the false balance between pro-growth and no-growth, without ever getting into the discussion of exactly what do we want to do, what can we agree on, what kinds of technologies are appropriate to bring, what are the kinds of businesses that we want to attract. We're so busy arguing about the fundamentals that we never get to the kind of work necessary to get accomplished the kinds of attractions. We've got so many resources that we can build on. We have so many attractions for tourism. We've always put our eggs in one basket. From the beginning of the gold rush, it was all about gold. We then had a 100-year kind of bust after the boom, and we did timber, and we shut down all 8 mills that were here, and we had that bust. And now we're facing, put most of our eggs, or a lot of them, in building, and we now have a national issue there. We have to have a diversified economy. We've got to have clear plans to achieve that. The organization of the business community has sometimes been, has a hard time working with community groups and coming together to develop consensus on these things. And I've seen in Valley Springs, I've seen in Copperopolis, and a number of other places, these pitch battles that never really get to the creative possibilities of this region. I also think we haven't capitalized on our resources. The McCollum River, the North Fork, is one of the best Class 4 whitewater rivers in California. Ours, a local company, would love to open that to commercial rafting. We haven't developed ourselves a strategy or a plan to be able to facilitate that. And finally, I think the government has not played the role that it should in facilitating. We sometimes have weighed in on one side or another with pro-growth and no-growth, which is, again, so false in its nature that it paralyzes any possibility. And I think that it's important that government clearly identify roles, help facilitate conflict resolution instead of polarizing our communities against one another. And ultimately, our role is to mediate, facilitate, and then move forward, expediting the things that will help our economy. And so the government has a role here, but the market will ultimately have something to do with what happens in this small sector. Sustainable growth of business and jobs that promotes the well-being and the quality of life for Americans. So, economic development means business, and if you're going to have business, the Board of Supervisors can help get business here by removing roadblocks to business, reducing red tape, whatever we can do to help businesses get started. Enterprise zones. The enterprise zones are, you can have an area, say West Point, or someplace that needs a business, giving them advantages for businesses to be there. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Next question, Mr. Morrison. What is your position on the road impact fees, and should the county implement a gas tax to improve the roads?
Even gas tax on $4 a gallon gas, that would be extreme, I think. Road impact fees, I don't think we've come up with all the answers to that, because
if it's a development or a new house, then we know how to deal with it. But everybody that's already, an old house, how are they paying for roads? Just with taxes. And so it's only with new stuff going in that gets a road impact fee. I think we need to do more work with trying to spread that out or make it the responsibility of everybody that uses the road to pay for the road.
We had one of the most tortured discussions in county history over the implementation of road impact fees, RIN fees. And ultimately, it began with a lawsuit, I guess 17 years ago, something of that nature. And then we did nothing for the intervening 15 years. And all the counties around us were collecting RIN fees of up to, even El Dorado, a fast-growing community place, had RIN fees up to $12,000 per new unit. And that paid for new roads. There has to be a nexus between the development fees, the RIN fees represent, and the impact of new development. This county ultimately, after a second threatened lawsuit, implemented the lowest RIN fees in the region. And what we're getting is approximately 30 cents on the dollar to cover the impact of new roads. And a lot of people are concerned that that's really not getting it done, especially when you add to that the fact that old roads, not the new stuff, but those of us who have been living here all these years, are, while we complain about the potholes, except in Cheap Ranch, which wants to dig it deeper, I think, to keep the folks out. But most folks are concerned about the state of our roads, and they're right. About $600,000 a year is what we're falling short in maintaining the conditions of the old roads as they are. So that's a pretty bad double whammy for the prospective roads. And it will take an honest dialogue with citizens about our responsibilities. You won't fix it all by having a RIN fee that pays entirely, even if we get it from 30 cents on the dollar to, 50 cents on the dollar. Even if you did that with the new development community, it's still going to be covering the existing roads, and it's up to the citizens of this, and that's what democracy does. If we were to be honest with you in the way that I've just been, it would be to say it's going to cost money. I don't believe in a gas tax. I think there's a heck of a time for that. I agree with John on that subject. But it's really important that we not just duck our head in the sand and pretend that we don't have a problem in maintaining our transportation system. And then you can't also say that you want economic development and have roads that nobody can travel on. So in fact, it's going to be true that up country, we're going to have long, windy, poorly kept roads for some time to come, at least in our lifetime with current financing. But if we don't have that honest dialogue, and if you, the citizens, don't participate and let us know what level of contribution on maintaining our roads are people willing to do and through what vehicle, then we'll simply be whining and complaining about it rather than actually doing something about it. And I think government has to lead by presenting the facts to folks and trusting people enough to make the right decision. And we're out of time, but there's lots more on roads.
Thank you. We'll start this next round with Mr. Walensky. What is your position on the driveway slope issue?
Well, that's been a subject of great controversy and, in my view, great demagogy. What we have is a law that says that we have 16%, driveways can be built on 16% grade. For a while, this county had kind of a whimsical thing that said, well, you can do anything up to 21% with certain conditions, and had some kind of a cap at that. It's come to find out that the law actually says that you can, there is no statutory limit. CAL FIRE was the one that told us that we were actually building things that they couldn't serve, which triggered the current crisis in it. The solution is that we should have, and this is what's going on right now, the Board of Supervisors just passed unanimously, and I think it was unanimous, maybe 41, that was to create no cap on it, which is 21% driveway slope cap off, and instead are consistent with law, which is that if you can mitigate it to the point where it would be equivalent to 16%, then you can build. The real problem with all of this is that we need safe places. We cannot be building things that safety equipment can't get to in these kinds of fire zones. So it's important that we mitigate those appropriately, and I think the flexibility in the new policy should help. More important yet is that the details of that flexibility, finding out what equivalencies are to be met at the 16% level if you go over it, is the subject of discussion for stakeholders, for people who are builders, realtors, people who are in the business, as well as community members, to try to go through this and get some details on it and bring it back to the board for a policy. But this is a complicated issue that I wish people, again, would stop tribalizing over. Sometimes when we only talk to people we agree with, we can get almost a cult perspective on the truth. And I think this dialogue is very important in the stakeholders group will be a place where hopefully people of different perspectives, CAL FIRE and builders may not see eye to eye, but we do have a legal framework that we can work with. And if we have a level of stability and fact basis for this dialogue, we'll come to better conclusions than simply hurling accusations across tribal lines.
Mr. Morris?
Driveway slope, there's not a lot to add. Like Steve said, I beat a dead horse. But it had been figured out, I think in 92, and then bring it back around and just not come up with any better answers. And if you're concerned about, the thing about fire, I don't know if is it fire that the driveway slope issue is about?
It was CAL FIRE that brought this
CAL
to
FIRE.
attention.
In San Andreas, about 2 months ago, there was a fire on Pope Street, and the fire department is right there, and after they got to the house, it took them 30 minutes to put water on the fire. And there's nothing, no driveway issue, no slope issue there, but the house was destroyed. And it didn't have anything to do with the driveway slope. So if you have a house that's on a hill, and it takes 5 minutes for the fire department to get there, you don't have a chance anyway. So I don't. It's got to be legal, but I don't know why we're all hung up on it. We can use some common sense about it and move ahead.
We'll start the next question, Mr. Morris. How long should it take for a project to go through the planning department when the project is properly zoned, the EIR is complete, water and sewer hookups are paid? This expecting planning / building department.
How long should it take for a project to get approved in the planning department?
To process through the
I have no idea how long it should take, but I do know that it's a lot faster in Tuolumne County and in Amador County, and I don't know why we can't copy what they're doing there to make our process faster. I know ours is really slow, and I don't know what they're doing. I haven't been to the planning department to see them working, so I have no idea if they're just turning papers and shuffling stuff and answering one question at a time instead of a whole page of questions. I have no idea, but I know that they're not doing it like they do it in our neighbors' counties, and I think we can copy the other counties and move ahead. Thank you.
There's no set time because every project comes in different, and each project has a set of obligations and processes, and large ones have entire EIRs to go through and public processes that should take a little longer than small projects. The exasperation that many people in our communities get in line behind Oak Canyon Ranch, and you've got a deck to build, that you wind up waiting a very long time for something that should be absolutely instant in nature. There should be almost it's like the equivalent of a bench ruling in court for projects of certain sizes. There's no question that we got ourselves into a hole. There's a big backlog when we were in a boom, and this is we didn't staff adequately. We did studies that showed not only that, but that we were structurally deficient, that we were operationally bereft, and that we had a whole lot of training and a whole culture shift to customer service from a haughty sense of entitlement, and that's been a very difficult transition, which is by no means complete. But I do believe that we should be a whole lot faster than what we're dealing with now, and it's a subject of great concern both from the community and the board of supervisors as it exists. But we have implemented some structural changes, some policy changes, and the backlog has actually diminished rather significantly over the last 2 months.
We'll start the next question with Mr. Walensky. District 2 has an extremely large Native American population that is impoverished. How would you address this?
It's not how would I address it, it's how I have been attempting to address it. We began about 2 months into my first term, now to be completed, by inviting former loggers and people in the timber industry, mill workers, representatives of 2 tribal councils, the Mountain Miwok Tribal Council and the Calaveras Band of Miwoks, and environmental organizations into a room, which none of them could figure out how they wound up in that room with each other. But we, out of that, and knocking some heads together, came the CHIPS project. And there have been a number of Native Americans that have gone through truck driving school and are now in permanent positions off of welfare. There are a number of people who have been involved in helping build that program. They're out on shipping crews that are thinning around seniors' houses and giving them 100-foot clearance. There's a sense that this project it's won 5 out of the 6 grants that it has sought, and it is now actually making money, both private and public contracts have been signed, and the project is up and running. That's concrete, it's serious. On housing, we worked very hard on a series of housing grants, and one, there was $750,000 available statewide, and we put together a proposal that was so compelling it brought $500,000 of that to West Point to rehabilitate and to, where necessary, rebuild houses. Now, that alone doesn't take care of this, but there's no way to solve the problems of poverty without a comprehensive set of approaches. We're working with Native American kids. There's a culture project. There's a Dream Catchers program. We've initiated all kinds at all levels of generational issues we've tried to address. We're working with the probation department to try to get people back on their feet after coming through their terms in prison. This is a community that is so hard-pressed that it's not just 1 or 2 programs, but a community-wide effort, and a recognition that a history of genocide is something that is not easy to overcome without community involvement and without community help. I'm grateful to be part of communities that rise to that occasion and have been very active in making sure that we don't repeat histories, but that we build our own new course.
I don't have an answer for it. I don't know what to do with the impoverished Indians. It sounds like we could just get some more grants and get them, work with the community and get Indians back in out of poverty. I don't know.
I can learn.
Let's start the next question with you, Mr. Morrison. Would you support bringing big box stores to Calaveras County?
Sure. I'm sure that big box stores, we all use them, we all go there, when you need stuff, that's where, if you gotta go to Walmart, that's where you go. But I'm sure that we gotta think a little bit smaller than Walmart, because Walmart isn't gonna put a store anywhere in Calaveras County. That would detract from the other 3 counties around us. And we're not big enough for them to support a Walmart in Angels Camp or Santa Rosa. We don't have the population for it. Smaller anchor stores like Mervyn's, maybe Target, Sears, but then Sears has stores everywhere too, so they probably wouldn't be interested. And I'm sure that they have their own people out looking to see where they can put a store that would work. They study the demographics. They know where people are shopping. When you go to one of those stores, they ask you for your zip code. They know where you came from, and they have the information. They know if they can build a store here and it'd be profitable. When it becomes profitable, somebody's going to do it. Thank you.
This question, are you for big stores or against them, is again one of those things that I think there's a much more nuanced answer that would be more informative. The truth of the matter is that there are situations in which big box stores destroy rural communities, and there are studies all over about the Walmart coming into a small Iowa community and having entire Main Street shut down and having in the end fewer jobs that are lower paying and local vendors not being shopped, so that it unravels a very delicately constructed local economy.
Like Jackson.
Well, Jackson and Martell and that whole thing has actually been an issue, a kind of an object lesson in this. But actually, I don't have a position for or against any particular store. What I do have is a position that in the public interest, that anything that we encourage should be beneficial to the communities, not just what government thinks, but what those communities think. And that it should be a careful cost-benefit analysis in the end that will be comprehensive, not just talking about how many jobs, but what kind of jobs, and what kind of jobs to replace. What is the cost versus what is the benefit? I believe it's very important that people hire locally, that people invest in their communities by shopping locally where they can. Those kinds of agreements must be reached and be part of doing business here in this county, or otherwise we wind up pillaged and left for economic debt, another boom-bust kind of cycle. So I'm for looking at every possibility. I'm for analyzing it carefully. I'm for making sure that the public concern in each community helps guide government in making decisions about it, and that we ultimately come together to make right choices, which may be very different in Sheep Ranch than they are in Copperopolis. I'm just sure.
I agree.
Start the next question, Mr. Morrison. What strategies do you employ to support children and families in District 2?
Well, I actually served on the First Five Commission and the Calaveras Child Care Council, so I've actually spent a great deal of time over the last 3 years, 4 years discussing and trying to come up with strategies. We have a dearth of after-school programs. We have a dearth of programs for child care in this county. We have a lot of working parents that are having all kinds of crazy commute patterns as a result of the desperate search for those kinds of services. I was instrumental in establishing Parks and Rec Commission, which just finally happened this year, and we're beginning to have a basis for spending about 40 monies and giving kids safe places to play and recreate. There are nutrition issues in our schools, which I think are very important for our kids. We're talking about an obesity epidemic. A lot of our future health depends on our ability to exercise, our ability to eat well, and our ability to pass those kinds of things on to kids. I believe very strongly in a farm-to-school program where we take local produce and have healthy things come into our school lunch rather than ho-hos with a chocolate milk chaser. I really believe that there are so many local things we can do to improve quality of life for our kids and families. Another example is the Humbug Creek Farm Elementary School Farm Project, which has now funded itself over 7 years, where kids learn how to graft apple trees and do math projects by laying out rows of vegetables, figure out how to learn in new and different ways, and at the same time get exercise. I think there's a lot of community connection to our schools. On families, there's so much, we have so much distress in these communities with the long commutes and long times away, that having a local economy that is that really develops and draws people closer to home would do a lot toward quality of family life. We have 3 generations in some places of meth users, and that is one of the greatest destructive forces in family life in Calaveras County, with only alcohol coming in anywhere near it. And it seems to me that one of the bases for family health is to break our addictions, which means interventions early, which means spending more on education and prevention, so that we don't fill up our jails and all of our social programs with people who have that particular set of health problems. Family resource centers and the community service centers that we have, that I initiated actually a couple of years ago, and there's now 6 in this county. We're the first district to have 2. Is another basis for improving family life and accessing appropriate services. And I'm out of time.
Mr. Morris?
I think one of the areas that we can make a big difference, it takes a lot of cooperation from a lot of people, is the nutrition of in the schools. My degree is in food science, and I was talking with a gentleman up in West Point about the nutrition of students. He was telling me this long thing about students that get proper nutrition learn better. Well, if they learn better, then when they go do the math, they can figure they can learn the math, and it sticks. So I want to look at ways to improve nutrition and family nutrition. You get the information out there, and hopefully people will use it. It would make a huge difference with the meth problem that we have. That's just, nutritionally, you can make a difference with people that, meth robs people of nutrition. So if you turn that around and can actually do something that benefits them so that they can change their life, maybe we can get an advantage.
Next question, we'll start with,
I'll do this question, then we'll take 5 minutes break.
Mr. Morris. Most communities in District 2 are in the process of developing or updating their community plans. Would you favor continuing this process, and would you honor the will of the community even if it conflicted with any personal interest?
Yeah, this is a democracy. We will continue the process, and we will do what the community wants. That's simple.
Well, actually, the question is maybe has an erroneous presumption here. There's only one community in District 2 that has a community plan, and that's Moke Hill. You're right in it. And that happened due to a far-sighted group of people years and years ago that came together and went through what they describe as a living hell to come up with a great plan that has kept this town in what I consider to be a wonderful state of livability. And so even as recently as a year ago, there was this great dispute about whether the county would pave the roads of McCollum Hill in its mode, widening and making sure that it was up to county standard, or whether the community plan here would prevail and there would be windy, narrow roads, although newly paved, that would continue the walkability of this downtown. The people here rose up, defended their community plan, and it was kind of the cross that was held to the vampire to keep it as in its way, in the way that the people here felt best about. The other communities are having the struggle that the Delordos and Garamendis and many others of yesteryear in McCollum Hill went through now. And while there are those who are critical of the process, because it is a lot like making sausage. It's got a lot of components and it's not very pretty while it's being put together. But in fact, we have literally had hundreds and hundreds of people that have been to meetings to begin to establish, and we've gotten this far, where people have established some core values and sort of essential guiding principles for their community plans. They've developed, most of the communities have developed planning areas and then specific town centers. We got over an egregious mistake that was made years ago where the community was polled about what kind of those would like us in Blue Mountain communities, where people were polled and 85% said they liked small, identifiable rural towns, and somehow what came out of that sausage machine was 24 square miles of community center. How that happened is, a matter of speculation, but in fact we were able to correct that, and those 4 towns are now engaged in trying to redefine themselves. We're encouraged by the level of participation. I would hope that we would have a greater level of support from the county in that process, and that's really getting our staff out into the field has been very successful in community service centers and not as successful in the planning process. We have a lot more to do to engage with the county and make sure that our voices are heard in here. But we're ready for it, we're organized for it, and the level of participation has been outstanding and many times more than any other part of the county.
Thank you. Let's take 5 minutes. If you have questions, there's a table at the front dining, raise up there. I'd love to hear your questions. We've done, this is the 3rd candidate night this week. We did District 4, District 1 here. And these are the best questions I've seen all week. You guys are doing great. If you have questions,
Of course, it's back from District 2.
Language in the current draft of the general plan revision specifies that development be limited to existing roadways. However, in District 2, existing roads follow river canyons that do not allow for the widening necessary to accommodate build-out. Will you block development which would provide developer-built modern roads and alternate transportation pathways?
I figured that was probably Chris. We do have a problem, which is that in District 2 we've been limiting, we've been informing our development plans essentially by where the roads can accommodate it. There's so many other factors that come into it, and we've been paying for our ignoring some of those factors with spiking E. coli in the middle fork, putting too many septics into situations where the leach lines are actually below water level in some parts of that area. And I think that, fortunately for us, we have new technology that's just been actually been working on for the last 2 years. It's called the Warmth Watershed Assessment Tool. East Bay Municipal Utility District, coupled with the Upper McCollum Watershed Authority, which I sit on, developed this tool. And it allows us to take a look at underlying geology. It takes a look at steepness of slope, soil, the kinds of trees and vegetation, and the proximity to rivers. And it actually has got a 96% predictability about the impact of growth in different places within District 2 along the entire Colony watershed and what its effect on water quality would be. It seems to me that if we begin to take a look at that, and if we take a look at where to put future roads, that we might get ourselves out of the sensitive watershed area where 1.2 million people try to drink from our leavings. And I think it's time that we took a look at more than just roads to inform our development. That said, I don't like the word block development. What I like is the idea of figuring out best places to put things and opening up doors for where, and trying to have our plans direct us toward things that are viable, sustainable, and don't manage to foul the water that so many downstreamers drink from. That we have a real treasure here in the McCollum, and we should value it carefully while not using it as a block to things that could be done in places that are appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Morris?
Development, what's the question?
I was asking myself the same thing. No offense to it. However, current draft of the general plan revision specifies development be limited to existing roadways. However, in District 2, existing roads follow river canyons that do not allow for widening necessary to accommodate basically more housings or build out. Would you block development which would provide developer-built modern roads and alternate transportation pathways?
No, I think we have to we have to build, if we need new roads to get to new places, we need new roads. I don't see that it doesn't have any advantage to sticking with that we've blocked building or progressing by sticking to our old roads. But I got to agree with Steve that you have to take care of the water and not pollute the water. The whole thing is it's got to be done properly.
Next question will start with Mr. Morris. This has been in the news a lot. What do you think about the $7,000 donation from the realtors?
Well, it makes it a lot easier for me to proceed with the campaign. I don't have to worry about, how to pay for a flyer or pay for signs. Signs are not cheap. And I think if you check the totals, he's got more money than I do anyway, so I feel good about it. Thank you. Oh, the other thing is, if you can buy an election for $7,000, I think there'd be a lot more people doing it.
Well, I have mixed feelings about this. I think it's the right of people to weigh in on elections. I personally regret the kind of influence that money is having on our national politics. I think it's affected our state situation. I think you have to be virtually a millionaire to run for state assembly anymore. And I think that we are in an escalating situation here in this county where people have different ideas about how to weigh in and affect outcomes. What I think is important and that it's helpful to take a look at how campaigns are funded and who's funding what, and what interests may feel comfortable with what candidates. How I really feel about the $7,000 is that it was the biggest fundraising extravaganza that I've ever experienced for me. After that was announced in the paper, we actually received, it's been a total of about 325 contributions with the kinds of letters with them that says, well, it's not 7,000, but here's 20 we're grassroots. And I think that for me, we're going to need to people can decide. We disclose these things, and where our money comes from, and who's involved in our campaigns. And I think that is often very informative on national elections, how people might act in whose constituencies or what constituencies might be special in their interest. And I think that's just as good as Woodward and Bernstein once said, follow the money. You get a pretty good idea of what's going on. I hope someday we will find some way to have campaign limits here in this county, and that we would limit donations to something a little bit more reasonable. The wealthy should not, in a democracy, have a greater say than any other person.
Direct this question first to Mr. Walensky. Why are you running for supervisor?
Because my wife let me do a second term if the people were willing, actually. I have found this to be a job that is so challenging and so, inspirational. I draw a lot of that inspiration from the communities that I serve. I have found that we have much to do here. My experience sitting in my weekly office hours is that lots of people come in and tell me about all the things that I should be doing, and I see a list about a mile long, and would like to get on with it. This has been a humbling 4 years. I went in, it's kind of like the Mongol invasion of China. We came in with horses and flags waving and wound up speaking Cantonese. Government is slower than I had hoped, sometimes less inspired and less innovative or cutting edge than I had hoped. I'm working with 4 other people who come from very different constituencies and different types of communities and have different backgrounds and interests in art form, and trying to figure out what we have in common together and moving on rather than defining by our differences. And practicing that and taking my background in mediation and negotiations and conflict resolution, I've found that we've been able to get more done than I would have guessed in some ways, but at a slower pace than I ever would have dreamed. My reason for running is that I think there's a lot left to do, and that we're well on our way to accomplishing great things in District 2. I hope people feel the same, but again, it's going to be up to the voters of this district to determine my fate, and I'll live with that one way or another.
Well, like I said earlier, rather than complain about what was going on, I decided I would get into it and see if I could make some changes. And we'll find out in 3.5 weeks whether I'm going to get to make changes or not. That's all I have.
Subject changes. This has been asked of every candidate's night this week. We'll start with Mr. Morris. How will you resolve the ongoing quagmire in the Community Development Department?
Well, it would seem, I think you could just clean house and just start with the top and fix it. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Well, would that a single termination would change a working culture, a set of documents that are antiquated, and a set of disputes that are long-standing. But in fact, it would take a lot more than changing personnel. And the effort to reorganize this is Herculean in nature, but we have to understand how we got here. When you take a look at our documents, which are conflicted, and many of the things that we should have, we didn't even have a grading ordinance until recently. We didn't even have a rim fee until recently. There are a lot of things that other places had done long ago while we played Rip Van Winkle and dozed. We've now waked up to something of a nightmare, which is setting forth a need for change. Everybody knows that the place is not running effectively. Anybody who's ever had a project before it, and that's not just this last year or two, it's for quite some time, knows that we've got a whole lot of work to do over there. But to simplify it, to demagogue it, to politic it, or to deal with the different versions of history without examining the art of change, without trying to figure out how you change a working culture from something that was more self-aggrandizing and self-indulgent to a service-oriented culture, is no easy task, and it doesn't happen by waving a wand. It takes leadership, it takes hard work, and it takes a whole lot of training and cross-training to get people working as a team out of this set of histories and individuals. But we also need to honor the people who are making the effort. And that means people who are holdovers from another time, and it means people who are new and being setting upon one another. Again, I see it from my perspective as a whole series of issues. It's labor management issues, it is conflict resolution issues, it's changes in working culture, it's changes in the way we serve the public, it is changes in how we fund the operation, and we have been dishonest for years about being able to sustain ourselves when we charge fees that are, again, pennies on the dollar. So people demand a level of service, but we have not, every time somebody tries to raise a fee to equal that, there's a howl and scream about the cost of it. So we've got this interesting dynamic, which I consider to be rather ill-informed, where we're going to have to understand deeper what specific changes need to be made and how we're going to fund it. I also think that it does require leadership, and it requires leadership that understands how to marshal that sort of change, and whether we've got that or not remains very much in doubt. There's a lot of argument about it. I would just hope that people would end the demagoguery on this and begin to actually pitch in and help resolve these issues. The delight in conflict is getting us nowhere, and the blogosphere has been most damaging in terms of people's understandings of the facts.
Next question, directed first to Mr. Walensky, and I don't think this is redundant. Someone's asking, what will you do to make the government center more user-friendly for the little man, the local citizen?
Well, that's a great. I don't think it's redundant. The government center involves a whole lot of different, 22 different departments actually at last count. My view is that we are not sort of set up for business. We are actually structured more based on our funding sources than the services that we provide. I see 5 basic elements of service in the county. There's law enforcement, law and justice. There is the land use and public works. There is health and human services. There is an administrative, the finance and auditor, controller, treasurer, tax court, all of that. And then you have general services like our IT, our HR department, things that serve theoretically, serve the function of the whole. Now, how we manage to divide that up into 22 different pieces, which are often, I find people tearing their hair out in one department as the taxes are coming in or as a payroll's to go out, and people right next door with the same skills on not such a harsh timetable. It seems to me it's time that we began to merge effort, that we should train and cross-train people, that we should move the government under with less administrative overhead and a whole lot more deployment to the point of service, and that we need to also, again, this is redundant, we need to change the culture of the county, and that is no small feat. We've been doing things a certain way for a long time, and and reforms of this nature require negotiations, require a completely different HR structure and a completely different classification system to actually be effective in delivering the kind of service that this community deserves. I'd also say one other thing, that if we don't find a greater level of efficiency, that nobody's going to support paying for it, and that it's up to the government to make those changes first and inspire people to be willing to support a level of service that they're feeling good about. We can train people in customer service all we want, but you also have to have the right personnel in place, because it's like grafting an apple stock onto walnut rootstock, and it doesn't take. So we've done a lot of training, we've initiated a lot of things in this last couple of years, but I'm not sure we have been as effective as what I would have liked to see, nor as unified and inspired toward customer service as we ought to commit to.
Mr. Morse?
Well, the people that work in the government center are there to provide service to us. And I don't know what it takes to get them to want to be glad to work with us, glad to see us when we come in. But I would do my best to try to make it a place that provides the service that we need. Back 20 years ago, there was a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It was just a little bitty thin book, and it stressed the idea of catching people doing things right. Well, and because blaming somebody for anything, it just makes them feel bad, and it doesn't accomplish anything. And I don't know what's going on there. I don't spend a lot of time at the government center, but the attitude of a lot of people when I do go there is not very friendly, and it makes me think that they hate their boss. Well, if the boss is being less than catching people doing things right, somebody needs some training. Training, education. I think we can make it better. Maybe give everybody the look. Manager. I'll buy it.
Mr. Morse, we'll start the question with you. Do you think the recent moratorium on building contributed to the county deficit?
Well, it stopped building, and when you stop building, contractors quit pouring concrete. Now, if you want to order a load of concrete, they'll mix it up and bring it to you. You don't have to plan a few days in advance. They're ready to go. If they're not pouring concrete, all the other trades are suffering also. And I don't see that if they're not building, nothing's, and then it just trickles down from there to all the way to the grocery stores. I think it hasn't helped make us better. Thank you.
Well, first, I think the question is somewhat erroneous. There was no moratorium on building. There was a moratorium on building where a general plan change or a zoning code change needed to happen. So, in fact, there were scores of building permits that were issued during the so-called moratorium. The county economy would have been much worse had we not taken measures, temporary measures, to avoid an impending lawsuit, which would have wound up, in our estimate at the time, paralyzing by judicial ruling, exposing the county's deficiencies in its general plan. We could have had an imposed genuine moratorium that would have stopped building altogether, would have shut the county down for a much longer time, and would have put us in essentially state trusteeship or court trusteeship to do anything. We had our documents were in such a condition that the Board of Supervisors, as a whole, I might add, however confused some people or amnesiac some may be getting at this moment of the election, this was a unanimous board decision to take that as a strategic step, get our bearings, move in good faith toward doing a general plan revision and getting on with business. We actually ended that rather quickly, and we are certainly trying to encourage business in the appropriate places. But people who assume that this was done with great glee or enthusiasm are missing the intent and the motivation of this Board of Supervisors, which, by the way, had people from 3 different political parties all coming together to agree that this was the best strategy available to us to keep any local control and integrity to our system. So I know there's a lot of politics being played on this right now, but the truth of the matter is that whenever you get 5 members of this board agreeing on something, there must be something to it.
Next question, we'll start with Mr. Walensky. Where in the county do you see viable areas for retail shopping centers?
Well, you're in one right now. There's it's downtown, has some open space to it, and it'd be nice to fill up these small stores and have a vibrant community again. And you can say the same thing about Mountain Ranch, West Point, and others, where there is room for small retail. I presume from your question, however, that you're talking about a larger kind of center, and I see several places that make sense for that. Certainly Angels Camp, and we're working on joint meetings under my, since I've become the chair, we've had 2 joint meetings between the City of Angels and the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors, and we're beginning a process of joint work on trying to figure out best places to put stronger retail operations. We have places that have infrastructure. I don't know whether this is commercial, but certainly there's industrial potential around Toyon. What we do with the cement factory and the co-industrial center down outside of Valley Springs and just below Paloma are things that I think are assets that we ought to be paying attention to. The new retail operations in Copperopolis, I think, bode well for the economy of the county, and I voted for it. I think that, and I'm hoping that they will fill those stores out and be bringing in people to shop here as well. I would like to see a place that you could buy a pair of socks in this county, and I think that I'm tired of going to Jackson or something for that. So it's my view that we do need to pick the right places for this. And it will only be the kind of intergovernmental cooperation that you're beginning to see between Angels, and Calaveras County. We've had a long history of mutual suspicion, which I think is part of gridlock and paralysis, and the ability to start meeting together and figuring this stuff out. Where is the best place? Maybe it's just outside Angels. If that's the case, then we ought to be doing some form of revenue sharing so that it's not a big tug of war and a low-ball bidding process that determines where we locate, but rather the discussion about where the best place is to put it.
Mr. Morrison?
I don't know where the best place is. That we could put it to a vote and find out maybe, but Central seems like San Andreas is a good place to me because it is central and everybody goes there eventually. I don't know where to put the retail area.
I'm going to ask this last question, then we'll go to the closing comments.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll stick around afterwards if people have personal questions or whatever they want to ask.
We'll have a time for plenty of socializing. Mr. Morris, what is your vision of District 2 in Calaveras 20 years from now?
That's a good question. I don't see it changing a lot. There's probably going to be a few more people here in District 2. Probably in the whole county there'll be more people. But if even if the county doubled, we still wouldn't have 100,000 people in the whole county. So, you know, that's not even the size of a small city in the valley, 100,000 people. And that's spread out over a huge area. So, in 20 years, you know, the changes since I was in high school in San Andres haven't been much. You know, Winkler's closed, lots of shops, and then Louder's burned down. There have been lots of changes that it seems like less population and people moving out of town. So I don't see it changing a lot.
Well, I'd like to see the processes that we've begun in District 2 continue to their full possibility. I'd like to see activities for our youth and programs. I'd like to see services for seniors. I'd like to see these communities come together across their ideological and geographical and historic differences and find ways to get things done together. I want to foster an atmosphere of tolerance and a sense of community which already exists, but we need to build on that. It's our greatest asset, and it always overcomes any challenges that we face if we don't allow ourselves to divide about our differences on the way to it. I'd like to see us have an economy that is both robust but also is not our ruination. And that's a delicate balance that needs to be made, because most of the people in District 2 truly value their rural status. And for us to become a replica or a cookie-cutter version of the terrible failure to plan just to the west of us, it would be a terrible travesty. Somewhere in California should remain rural, proud, and free of greed-based development and resource extraction, and at the same time not to have to make the choice between, and this is, again, another false dichotomy, since that's the theme of my day here, the idea that our only choices are to be beautiful and poverty-stricken, or rich and but ugly. I think there's a much better way to go here, and that only with the full participation in a democratic process and a respect for one another, and while we remember that the fabric of these communities, while delicate, is truly our lifeblood, and our interconnection with one another is, even in economic hard times, is the best hope that we have for a future that is neither of those two choices. I hope people will be willing to participate even when it looks like sausage making, and even when we have our disagreements, find our way to that vision together, rather than having it imposed by government or by some faction or tribe within our communities.
Thank you. Gentlemen, let's go to closing comments, 3 minutes each. There's Mr. Walensky.
Many people have said I speak too many words, so I'm going to take less than 3 minutes here and just thank the people of District 2 for what has truly been a wild experience, kind of like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, actually, in Disneyland, if you've ever been on it. This has been a challenging 4 years. It has been an exhilarating and inspirational 4 years, and it's been a heartbreaking and sometimes disappointing. There's been a few moments along the way where things didn't work out quite the way one might hope. But in all of this, I've put every part of my heart and soul into representing the things that come to me, the people of this district. I have put every ounce of energy that I wake up with each day into this, and I hope that has been enough for you to cast your vote my way and allow me a second term. That's all I got to say.
thank everybody for showing up tonight. This is a big turnout from others I've been. I really believe that I can do a good job. I'm honest, and when you go to the polls, vote Morris, of course.
I want to thank our partners, the Chamber of Commerce, and the people that are here representing them tonight. Steve Hayward, Scott Burr, Diane Gray, thank you very much. And the Moke Hill Community Trust, which brought you those refreshments you had there tonight. And the candidates, no matter who you intend to vote for, I've got some experience in elections and dealing with candidates, and I'm just in awe of them, the courage that you guys have to put yourself forth and expose yourself to all the questions that people have. It's got to be tough. So I've got a great deal of respect for candidates as well. And I want to thank the people in the audience. You are wonderful. You've done really respectful job yourself tonight. Very civil. Thank you very much.
Talk to Diane just for a minute, okay?